Hey, what up, everybody? This is Mr. View again, yapping today about China. Yesterday, we were talking about Japan, and we learned out how influential the United States was with Japan, right? We kind of helped rebuild them, if you will. We turned them into a world power. We said, you don't have to have a military, we will defend you. So that led them to have all this extra money that they weren't spending on weapons and spending it on education and manufacturing and things like that. So they churned out some great goods without the focus on the military, and they were able to become this world superpower. So today we're going to turn to another world superpower, China. But they got there totally different than Japan did, right? They didn't have the help of the United States because after World War II, they turned to the other side, the dark side, communism. So let's find out how they got to where they are today. So China after World War II, they were kind of a train wreck. They had gotten defeated almost totally by Japan. Japan went in there right at the start of World War II, actually before, and just punched him in the mouth and 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 punched him all during World War II until the World War II pretty much ended and the United States ended up bombing Japan a couple of times, right? So China had got decimated a little bit. And right after World War II, there's a scrum for power. The nationalists on one side and the communists on the other. And that's right, the communists won. Their leader was a guy named Mao Zedong. And you see it spelled a bunch of different ways, but here's how they spell it in my book. Zedong, and he was the leader of the Communist Party, and he won over the people. He won over the peasants, especially. Everybody was kind of sick of the corruption of the nationalists, and so they followed Mao Zedong and his idea that man, this should be a peasant class led country and farming led because communism. Really plays on the equality of everybody, not being a rich, not being a poor, kind of everybody in the middle. All right. So that really appealed to some of the peasants who were obviously the poorer people in society. As I've stated several times in this class, there are more middle and poor class in every country in the world than there are rich. Right. So he was smart. He got the peasants behind him, and that's why he was able to win that battle, that civil war with the nationalists. So the communists win, and he sets up the People's Republic of China, which is obviously communist. So they nationalized business. They took it from private ownership and put it in government's hands. In communism, the government owns the businesses, right? So I don't own Mr. View's gymnasium. It's the government's gymnasium. Or I don't own this factory. It's the government's factory. So they took the private ownership away and they made it governmental owned. So that is a big change. They also redistributed the land. They took the land from the rich. So they had 100 acres. They took that 100 acres and they gave it to the peasants. And they cut it all up and said, okay, you all get equal plots of land. So they redistributed the land. And obviously that made the peasants happy. They get something for nothing. Did not make the rich people very happy, right? You're taking all my stuff and giving it to somebody else who didn't really necessarily deserve it or earn it. Not that necessarily the rich people maybe had not earned it either. So they redistributed the land. There is talk of that with socialism in America too, right? They want everybody to be equal. They don't want somebody to have $1 billion in America. These socialists, they want everybody to kind of be in a level playing field. Anyway, so the good stuff that the communists had done that did right after World War II, they built a bunch of factories and they built a bunch of railroads. They started to rebuild their country with the Soviet Union's help. They also built some canals, and canals are important for transportation of goods. They attacked crime and corruption, especially within the nationalists who had been there. They treated those nationalists that they had defeated very, very harshly. They increased literacy. They thought that literacy should be for everyone and not just the young, but the old as well. So they really increased their literacy. An educated workforce is a good workforce, right? The smarter the workforce is, the more they're going to achieve. They also sent out doctors. They had like roving doctors that would go to the peasant villages and help them out, which was a big, humongous change, right? So now they were walking from village to village, barefoot doctors, if you will, and they were helping with sanitation and helping, tell them how to stop disease and things like that. So these doctors were a godsend for a lot of those people. Women also enjoyed more equality under the communist regime. Remember, one of the keys of communism is equality. And so women were supposed to be equal in all aspects of society. Didn't really work. There's still a glass ceiling. They couldn't hold these big, huge jobs that always went to men. The glass ceiling was still there, in other words. But they did enjoy a lot more equality than they had been getting. Mao Zedong has a famous quote that women hold up half the sky. That's pretty deep, right? They hold up half the sky, so they deserve just as much as the men. Pretty famous. Some of the bad things, though. Mao Zedong had this idea of a great leap forward in 1958. And what he was going to do, he was going to take all this land that was redistributed and come up with communes. Communes sometimes were massive. There were thousands of acres of land sometimes. Several villages would get together. They'd have their own schools, their own factories, their own everything. And they were up to 25,000 people. And they would produce what they could for society, for China. Problem was, when you get these backyard factories like this and people not necessarily knowing what they're doing, bad things are going to happen. They had very, very low quality of goods. The quality of goods stunk. They also had very low output because a lot of these guys didn't know what the heck they were doing, right? And the food production dropped tremendously along with a famine. Right? A famine occurred. Up to 30 million people starved to death in China between 1959 and 1961. 2 years, 30 million people. Put that in perspective. That's almost 10% of our population now in America. That's a lot of people, right? So 30 million people starved to death, 1959 to 1961 in China. So obviously that's a bad thing that happened. They had a horrible relationship with the United States. We wouldn't even recognize them for a long time. We did not enjoy China at all, even though we tried to help them in World War II. That soured when they went to communism. But not only that, but they had a bad relationship with the Soviet Union, and they ended that relationship after several years after World War II. Even though Soviet Union helped them out, and they were both communist, they didn't get along. They didn't see eye to eye. China's communism focused on peasants, farmers, whereas the Soviet Union's more factory workers. So there was a big difference in philosophies, if you will, and they started to butt heads a little bit. They also shared a border, and that didn't go well either. So they were kind of competing for satellite countries. We know that China right now is kind of a train wreck. While they are super, super powerful in the world, we also know what's going on with their Muslims over there, that, the internment camps and the forced sterilizations and things like that. Their communism is a bad thing over there. They limit their rights. There's no like freedom of internet stuff, and but we'll get to that later. I'll answer my questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.